Now from Austin, Texas, Politics with the Big Dogs, and your host, Anthony Holm.
Welcome to Politics with the Big Dogs. I'm Anthony Holm, Republican trial lawyer, lover of liberty, constitutional conservative. You're joining us for our first radio broadcast. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your commitment to the cause. For 250 years, patriots like you have ensured that we, here in America, and especially in Texas, are able to live a free and prosperous life. And perhaps more importantly, we're able to pass on those freedoms to our children and their children, just as we inherited them from our parents and forefathers. Without activists like you and thinkers like you, our movement will fail. This nation would not exist but for people like you. Who you are and what you do is critical to the success of our country, to continuing the prosperity of this fine republic, and to the benefit of our children. We owe a duty to those who came before us, from our founding fathers to the soldiers who saved us in World War II. Part of our duty, our responsibility, is continuing their legacy of liberty. And that's what we do here on Politics with the Big Dogs. So thank you for joining. Now a little bit more about me. I've already said I'm a Republican trial lawyer. I try cases in the courtroom for those who have been wronged. I fight for liberty and justice here on the radio and in my legal practice. Early in my career, I ran candidate campaigns. So my job was electing Republicans here in Texas and nationally. And I designed and implemented issue advocacy campaigns, which means I changed public sentiment to advance issues, often some of the most difficult and pressing problems in our society. For example, accountability in public education or portability in public education dollars, reforms to our debt-laden pension systems, and leading movements against excessive taxation. I've also represented some of America's largest political donors, including the founding funder of Swiftboat Veterans for Truth, all the way back in 2004. I've authored a number of conservative pieces, which have run in many outlets, and authored a book, 52 Reasons Not to Vote for Obama. I rolled that book out in 2012 as Obama was running for re-election. For more than 2 decades, I've done my best to advance liberty and honor the Constitution. From national news shows debating and advancing conservative values with Laura Ingraham, O'Reilly, CNBC, and others. So like you, I've spent much of my adult life fighting for and advancing liberty. At stages in my career, I was a consultant to the Republican caucus in the Texas House of Representatives. At another point in my career, I was a consultant to the Senate Republican caucus in the Texas legislature, which is why here on Politics with the Big Dogs, we will discuss and debate national issues while also going in depth into Texas-specific policies and politics. I've elected or helped elect scores of conservatives across America, including a number of statewide Republicans in Texas and many Republican state representatives and senators. And on this show, we'll talk to many of our current and former state representatives, state senators, statewide elected officials, and other thought leaders about policies and politics of the moment. And we'll do more than talk. We'll probe them about issues, about the reasons these policies have or have not been implemented. So saddle up, my friends, and let's get ready to ride. We're going to take deep dives into substantive issues with some of America's leading experts and thinkers. We're going to unpack the good, the bad, and the ugly about an issue, a cause, our successes in Texas and America, and also our failures. For example, there's no reason we have not materially lowered our property tax burden in Texas or ensured proper accountability and the highest levels of academic outcomes in our public schools. Yet none of this has occurred. When asked, our elected officials say they tried, or they got close, or they point the finger at another culprit as to why an issue failed again. On Politics with the Big Dogs, we're all going to have a real conversation, real discussions, and real debates to really know what is happening and why. And most importantly, we're going to discover together how to overcome these obstacles and ensure liberty continues to spread across Texas and America. Our state, Texas, is America's beacon of liberty, so let's light that path forward. As leaders for liberty, our objective on this program is to ensure that each of us is well informed and empowered to affect change. We are change agents. We talk, we think, and we vote. We wake up every morning ready to fight for our republic, to fight for our conservative causes, fight for our children, and together we will win. An organized, citizen-led effort with good ideas always overcomes when advocates of those ideas show grace and shine sunlight on the darkness. And on Politics with the Big Dogs, we shine brightly. I'm excited, and I hope you are too. Saddle up, and remember to sign up at politicswiththebigdogs.com so you can stay current on the issues and debates of the moment.
More Politics with the Big Dogs coming up next.
Welcome to Politics with the Big Dogs. I'm Anthony Holm, a conservative trial lawyer, lover of liberty, and constitutional conservative. Always have been, always will be.
If you read the newspaper or watch your local news, did you know you're only getting press release news from Austin? We're here to bring you the real stories.
It's an issue that many of you have been talking about for years.
Politics with the Big Dogs, hosted by conservative host Anthony Holm, is the place for everything the mainstream media isn't covering.
An issue that's a big challenge in so many communities. We have to get that done.
That's where we come in, 5 days a week. Politics with the Big Dogs is heard on great radio stations across the state. Hear the show anytime at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Call your favorite radio station and tell them you want to hear the big dogs on this radio station every day. Keeping Texas free, keeping Texas from not becoming California, keeping it real. Politics with the Big Dogs. Find us at politicswiththebigdogs.com.
And get it done right.
My friends and fellow patriots, for more than 2 decades, Republicans have controlled the Texas House of Representatives, the Texas Senate, and the governorship. Recently, many of our conservative values have been advanced into law, yet legions more have still failed to pass. Why? What has happened? And how have we wasted so much opportunity? For more than 100 years, Democrats controlled Texas, since Reconstruction into the 1990s. In the early to mid-1990s, we Republicans began to have some success in Texas at the statewide and legislative levels. Yet 30 years later, we're only now beginning to enact limited conservative programs, while so many other pro-liberty bills and opportunities remain outside of our reach. We deserve better. You deserve better. Our children and grandchildren deserve better. We deserve a more free and prosperous land than we are offering them as of today. We can no longer waste our Republican majority. We must pass into law substantive reforms to limit the growth of government and the reach of government, to advance pro-liberty policies across our great state and nation. One of these causes that we simply must enact is called banning taxpayer-funded lobbying. This is a seemingly obscure concept. It is probably not top of mind for most of you or your friends. Yet taxpayer-funded lobbying impedes your basic rights and your basic liberties. Taxpayer-funded lobbying blocks issues that you have actively fought to advance. This is one of the dirty little secrets in Texas government, and we're about to expose it. So what is taxpayer-funded lobbying? It is exactly what it sounds. I doubt many of us even realized our hard-earned tax dollars, monies that we surrender and we're forced to remit to our local governments at all levels, is weaponized against us. Municipal utility districts, cities, counties, school districts, the many thousands of local governments that exist in Texas take our tax dollars and use them to lobby the Texas legislature. Local governments transfer hundreds of millions of our dollars to private lobbyists here in Austin. These lobbyists get paid outrageous sums to go and fight against freedom, to fight against the causes that you and I believe in. Imagine this, our tax dollars being weaponized against our values. Today we're going to talk to James Quintero of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, often referred to as TPPF. This is one of the leading conservative think tanks in America, certainly the best-known think tank for conservative values in Texas. James has been one of the thought leaders, if not the thought leader, and largest advocates on behalf of TPPF fighting to ban the practice of taxpayer-funded lobbying. I bet many of you are appalled to learn your tax dollars are being spent by your local governments to hire legions of lobbyists to ensure that our local governments continue to have the ability to increase our taxes. This is a sad cycle where our tax money is being used to pay lobbyists who lobby so that the same local government can take more of our tax money to pay more to those lobbyists next session. In the last year, over 100 million of your hard-earned tax dollars were taken from your pockets and used by local governments to lobby the Texas legislature. The school boards use our taxes to hire lobbyists. The cities use our taxes to hire lobbyists. The counties use our taxes to hire lobbyists. And what are some of these priorities from these local governments? First and foremost, it's to ensure that the Texas legislature, the Republican-controlled Texas legislature, does nothing to limit the amount of taxes these local governments can continue to collect. Imagine that. Fight Republicans to ensure local governments can raise taxes. And guess what? Some of those Republicans appear to be helping these lobbyists defeat this bill. The city of Dallas, for example, has a number of legislative priorities, one of which is to ensure the Republican-led legislature does nothing to interfere with their effort to advance ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting, folks. We all know what this is. It's the eradication, the elimination of the Republican primary. The city of Dallas is using hundreds of thousands of your tax dollars to ensure candidates are listed on an election without party identification, so their residents get to pick the name and place the order of who they most want. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. We, you and I, listeners of Politics with the Big Dogs, have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to defend our tax dollars. We have an opportunity to defend the Republican primary. And we have a duty to act. We have an opportunity to learn. We have an opportunity to educate ourselves. And we have an opportunity to speak with a common voice to ensure Texas bans taxpayer-funded lobbying this special session. This recent session, we thought it was going to pass, perhaps foolishly, but I was a believer. There were a number of bills filed to ban it. The leading bill was Senate Bill 19. Unfortunately, even though the Texas Senate is traditionally very conservative, it was amended on the floor in such a way that it probably wouldn't have been effective. And then the bill was sent to the House, where it died in a committee called State Affairs. So it appears the Senate put a big loophole on it, and then it died a slow death in the House. Our guest today will edify and inform us about the specifics of the bills. Here's what we know. We're wasting our conservative majority. When we aren't forcing our Republicans to advance conservative legislation like this, then we are failing. And we are failing, but no more. So now the governor of Texas, Governor Greg Abbott, called what's called a special session. Of course, regular session is 140 days every other year on odd-numbered years. So we began in early January and ended at the end of May or the first couple of days of June. And banning taxpayer-funded lobbying didn't pass. There's a provision in the Texas Constitution that says the governor of the state may call a 30-day special session, and Governor Abbott has made that call. And he's added banning taxpayer-funded lobbying to the call. The Constitution states the governor decides what topics go on the call for a special session. Article 4, Section A of the Texas Constitution says the governor may call at any time and for any reason a special session. However, he must state his purpose in the proclamation calling the legislators to special session. It actually says the governor can call it at any time and for any reason. How powerful. The special session runs for 30 days. Governor Abbott said, come back, have a special session, and among the items, pass a ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying. So if the legislators fail to pass this ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying, it's incumbent upon us, the lovers of liberty, to advance and to advocate and communicate. Give them 30 more days. And if they fail there, call another special session, because we and our children deserve to end this practice and deserve to save our tax dollars and deserve to pass conservative values and conservative legislation.
Don't believe everything you hear from Austin. Trust Politics with the Big Dogs. Here's more with Anthony Holm.
James Quintero joining us from Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about Texas Public Policy Foundation, TPPF first, and then let's talk about your background, then we'll get into the issue.
Well, the Texas Public Policy Foundation is truly one of the most special places in all of America. It is the headquarters of liberty. And whenever I go out and I speak to groups about what TPPF is, I think one of the best ways that people can conceive of it is we are like the Heritage Foundation, but we're specific to Texas. Here at Liberty's headquarters, what we try to do is we try to turn ideas into law. I think that's probably the best way to understand what the Texas Public Policy Foundation does is we turn ideas into law, which of course then raises the question, well, what kind of ideas? Because there are good ideas and there are bad ideas. Well, our ideas tend to center around personal responsibility, free market principles, and individual liberty. So usually if an idea involves one or more of those characteristics, we are right in the middle of the throes at the Texas legislature trying to turn that good idea into actual law.
Tell us about you. How long have you been at TPPF and what's your background?
Yeah, it's actually terrifying to think about because I just celebrated 17 years with TPPF. It went by in the blink of an eye. I think that's partially because I come to work every day and I have an absolute blast at what I do. I love fighting for liberty. I love helping this state become and stay the freest, strongest place in America and by extension, the world. And so I actually stumbled upon TPPF long ago in March 2008, coming straight out of grad school. It was either by accident or by providence, depending on who you ask. And it took me a little while to arm twist them and give a much younger, much trimmer James Quintero his first shot at a real job, but I did, and I never looked back. It's been absolute blast. I look forward to the next 17 years and really sticking it to the bad guys and getting in place some of the best and strongest laws, strongest pro-liberty laws that we can possibly imagine.
Thank you. Look, I'm going to take a moment of personal privilege here. Seriously. Many people have served our nation. Many have been in the armed forces. You have 5 children. I'm not trying to share too many personal details, but you have given 17 years of service to the liberty movement, fighting for freedoms for all of us while we raise our families and go to work. I'm sure you could be making more money working not for a nonprofit, not for a think tank. And it's with great honor and that we thank you. On behalf of the listeners, I thank you. So your time is well used, and we're real proud of you, and we appreciate you coming on the show. Let's talk a little bit about taxpayer-funded lobbying, what it is, why it's important, what has happened in the last few sessions. You've been the leader, probably the singular thought leader and advocate, certainly for TPPF, but perhaps the entire movement, and many people don't know what it is. So with that, let's take it from the top. Tell us about taxpayer-funded lobbying, what it is.
Yeah, what a great question. I wish more people knew about what's happening at the Texas Capitol because I think they would be absolutely outraged. It's probably the best kept, dirtiest secret in Austin. And what taxpayer-funded lobbying really refers to is the practice of governments lobbying government for more government, right? So we have a practice here in this state for some reason where our local governments can hand over a big bag of cash to a registered lobbyist who then is tasked with going up to the Capitol and fighting for higher taxes, more spending, and greater government control. And it's repugnant to the Texas ethos and really our push for limited government. And so, you know, when I go up there to testify on everything from property taxes to school choice to healthcare to whatever it is that conservatives are interested in that point in time, I almost always run into a taxpayer-funded lobbyist who is working against not only me, but everyone else in making sure that Texas is freer, safer, and better. And so just to put a little bit more of a point on it, when we think about the scope of this practice, folks ought to remember that there are 5,000 local governments in Texas, and I would suggest that most, if not all of those, participate in taxpayer-funded lobbying in some form, whether it's handing over a bag of money to a contract lobbyist, or it's employing a lobbyist directly to work as a government employee, or even handing over money to pro-government associations who act as their representative at the Capitol. These groups are very common, folks like the Texas Municipal League, the Texas Association of School Boards, Texas Association of Counties. One time soon, I'm going to actually sit down and work through some Texas Ethics Commission reports and figure out just how many associations there are. I guarantee you it will be mind-blowing. There's a million of them. But these are all the interests that are working against Texans, and we have to put a stop to it.
It's interesting that you said that. So in preparation for this show, I went to the Texas Ethics Commission. I printed out some of those. I looked at them. I was stunned. I have before me 18 pages of registered lobbyists only because I put in the word city. So working for the city of Abilene, Addison, Alamo, a little tiny town way down in the valley, Amarillo, Alamo Heights, city of Humboldt, Houston, McKinney. I'm flipping through it. San Marcos, city of Austin, city of Round Rock. I found a city called Fate, F-A-T-E, which, according to the internet check, had just under 18,000 people in it, yet they paid at minimum $22,000 to a lobbyist, as I read this report. So when you talk about bags of cash going from local governments, we're not talking about government's money. We're talking about taxpayers' money, correct? They are using our tax money to go and lobby. And I want you to answer that, but I want to put this out there for the listeners. It's anathema to me that it's happening, but it's galling to me on a personal level that a mayor, a city council, a county commissioner needs someone else to lobby their state rep or their state senator. That's a fundamental function of their role and their job, being elected representatives. So I'm struck by both of these. So first, edify us and confirm, please, is this all tax money or is there some magic pot of cash out there? And then second, let's talk to the needs of a mayor to hire somebody else to advocate for him.
What a terrific set of questions. So let's take the first one. In terms of cost, we put forward a report in March of this year detailing the $98.6 million that we could track through the Texas Ethics Commission that was spent on taxpayer-funded lobbying. That only speaks to the contract lobbyist element. So oftentimes your cities, your counties, your school district, they'll have intergovernmental relation teams on staff. Those are basically in-house lobbyists. And those are a separate expenditure from that $98.6 million, as are the pro-government association. So that the $100 million or so that we were able to track in taxpayer-funded lobbying expenditures is just a portion. And by the way, that's just the direct cost. This is what most people don't realize is government can spend a lot of money to stop or advance something, and in the process, it delays or defeats the conservative agenda, right? So there's a value associated with a piece of legislation going down that conservatives really wanted and is delayed for another session or two, right? And of course, it's unknowable what that cost is, but that is something that folks need to take into account, that this practice is not just a direct expense, but there's also all sorts of unknowable expenses too. Now, getting back to your question about
that's so clever. I'm going to interrupt you because that's so clever, and I hadn't thought of it. I saw the $98 million, and as I calculated over the last 6 or so years, is about $250 million, a quarter of a billion that we could say unequivocally were taxpayer funds spent on lobbying and largely against conservative values and our interests. That's the equivalent basically of a highway connecting Dallas and Fort Worth, or 3 Midland airports, as I recall. But your point was a little different, and I thought that's brilliant, which is the negative, trying to prove the negative or the lost value. So okay, they burned a quarter of a billion over the last 6 years, but what if TPPF and other advocates were able to lower our property tax values by a quarter point, but for that $250,000 expenditure? Well, now we're putting $1 billion back into the stream of commerce into Texans' pockets, who are then creating jobs, who are then funding their churches and funding relief programs for the folks in Kerrville and others. So that value is not spoken to in the $250 million. Is that some of the examples that you were referencing?
That's exactly right. I'll give you an illustration of this point. So back in 2015, we began working with state leadership on trying to reform Texas's property tax limitation, right? So at that time, what local governments were allowed to do is raise taxes by as much as 8%. And if they exceeded that 8%, then folks were allowed to petition and to try and challenge the increase. What we were attempting to do at that time is lower the 8% to as little as 3 or 4%, and install an automatic voter approval requirement that would have forced local officials to go to voters with anything above that marker and say, hey, look, guys, we really need a tax increase of some substance, and here's why. You guys decide at an election, right? So
imagine that, the right and appropriate way to justify, we need to increase your taxes. We have to build something for our community. Okay, I'm willing. I'll do that. I'm open to that.
So we started that in 2015. It took us until 2019 to actually get it done. The law didn't go into effect until 2020. So there's a 5-year period of time there where taxpayer-funded lobbying cost everyone in this state money, whether they knew it or not.
The opportunity cost of 5 years of value. That makes a lot of sense, and I hadn't thought about it. Okay. Thank you. I interrupted you. Let's go back to that. So there's the bags of cash question. We've already been on so long. Thank you for your time. I want to keep you, but let's do this. Tell us what happened last session. Why don't we, what was it? SB 19, was that the bill it was the taxpayer funded lobbying bill, correct?
Yeah, so we entered the regular session with, I think, a fair amount of optimism that the legislature was finally ready to act. Unfortunately, we got jammed up in the House State Affairs Committee.
I'm going to interrupt you because I'm going to ask you, Our listeners are much less knowledgeable than you were. So did the bill originate in the Senate?
Sure. So the lead vehicle last session was a bill, Senate Bill 19, put forward by Senator Middleton. And this bill would have effectively disallowed governments from handing over money to Chapter 305 registered lobbyists. Now, it got watered down a little bit in the process, but I think they could have fixed it in either on the floor or in conference committee. Nonetheless, the bill moved from the upper chamber down to the lower chamber and never saw the light of day in any House committee.
Okay, hold on. You're still going quickly because our listeners are not. So, no, I appreciate it. We're going to get there. But what does it mean to be watered down in the Senate? What happened and why do we think that happened? Because the Senate, Dan Patrick's usually a pretty strong leader. The Senate is generally more conservative on policy, or has been certainly the last 6 years. My words, not yours, just my observations. But so what's it mean? This is a program we talk about the tough subject matters, and we got to look under the hood.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm still not sure what the motivations were, but I can tell you the effect of the amendment was to allow the associations to continue as if nothing really happened. And when you think about the nature of taxpayer-funded lobbying, it's very easy for these lobbyists to kind of skirt the law or circumvent the intent of the legislation. So what ended up happening with that amendment is a big old loophole was carved into the law as it moved from the Senate to the House. And we were concerned that they were going to use that to continue on the practice without much change.
Okay. And then it passes the Senate with the loophole, and it goes to the Texas House.
So it goes to the Texas House, and that's really where the heart of the fight has been for a long time. I'd say this fight really started in earnest in 2019. That's when we got a rather robust floor debate in the House, and folks really went at it. Unfortunately, our side lost that particular vote, but that's really where the fight exists. And so coming into the House, we thought, okay, well, perhaps we have an opportunity here to do something good. unfortunately, we never got a chance to make our arguments in committee. The House State Affairs Committee never brought the bill up for discussion. And again, it's not really clear why, especially given House leadership's very clear preference for a ban of some sort. It didn't make sense to me now. And what I'm hoping is that here shortly in this next special session, we'll have an opportunity to revisit that bill in committee and really put some muscle behind it to get it out.
I like it. Well, our listeners, we're going to be looking at them to help with that muscle. So let's talk a little bit about what special session is. I introed that in the beginning and gave an overview. And I want to applaud Governor Abbott. I've not always praised him for perhaps as much as I should have, but I've got to give him 2 thumbs up on this one. He called a special session, which, as I explained to listeners, it's a 30-day window of opportunity to pass legislation. One can only pass legislation as that is on the call, right? The subject matter the governor permits the legislature to meet on. Now, James, if I'm ever mischaracterizing or you read it differently, jump in. You're not going to offend me. We want to get things right on this program, and we want to have a robust debate, even if it's you and I. So here we are, and the governor put, I believe, 18 items on the call, but we're talking about taxpayer-funded lobbying and banning it. So what's it look like, and what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's reason to be optimistic. It's very clear, just based on the presence of the taxpayer-funded lobbying charge, that state leadership is interested in making progress on this issue. Thus far, we have probably 10 or so different measures having been filed, with most of them being filed in the House. We're still waiting on anything to be filed in the Senate. I'm informed that early next week that should happen, and I believe Senator Middleton will again champion that measure in the upper chamber. So there's some momentum beginning to formulate. But it's going to be a tough slog. I don't want anybody to walk away, thinking this is a done deal, because it's not. There's going to be a lot of lobbyists that are funded by our tax dollars up there arguing against a ban on the practice, which is kind of ironic, right? And so I think the average person not only needs to be aware of the situation, but also reach out and let your member know whether you think this is a good practice or not. It's up to us. We, the people, are in control. And when we speak out and we let folks know, hey, this is either the right thing or the wrong thing to do, I can tell you the people up at the Texas Capitol listen. And so, I just want to encourage everybody who's listening right now to get engaged, because the next 30 days are going to be a very critical time that will help shape the future of Texas and either make us a little bit more free or a little less free.
You nailed it. You just nailed it. The lobbyists up there using our tax dollars to fight against us, to take members to dinner and sweet talk them and whisper in their ears for hours and hours. They're permanent friends at times. I pulled one lobbyist. I just thought, I think this guy does some of that. He had 19 clients, 19 clients, probably $1.5 million. And like I said, there were 18 pages of cities. Didn't even look at counties or MUDs or so many of the others. We went through some of it earlier before you joined on some of the examples of like ranked choice voting. That's what the charge is from the City of Dallas lobby team to protect, which means, of course, they want to extinguish the Republican primary and bring in that's the taxpayers funded entity. The citizens of Dallas are paying their taxes, are going to these lobbyists to advance these ideas and to defeat you and your efforts and efforts that I believe in, and pro-liberty and pro-freedom efforts. Like, hey, we ought not be using tax dollars to fund lobbyists. That's what the citizenry is for. That's what our elected officials are for.
Love what you're hearing? Find all of our shows at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Subscribe to our newsletter and send in your questions. politicswiththebigdogs.com.
Welcome to Politics with the Big Dogs. I'm Anthony Holm, a conservative trial lawyer, lover of liberty, and constitutional conservative. Always have been, always will be.
If you read the newspaper or watch your local news, Did you know you're only getting press release news from Austin? We're here to bring you the real stories.
It's an issue that many of you have been talking about for years.
Politics with the Big Dogs, hosted by conservative host Anthony Holm, is the place for everything the mainstream media isn't covering.
An issue that's a big challenge in so many communities. We have to get that done.
That's where we come in, 5 days a week. Politics with the Big Dogs is heard on great radio stations across the state. Hear the show anytime at politicswiththebigdogs.com. Call your favorite radio station and tell them you want to hear the big dogs on this radio station every day. Keeping Texas free, keeping Texas from not becoming California, keeping it real. Politics with the Big Dogs. Find us at politicswiththebigdogs.com.
And get it done right.
The real story from Austin. Now, more Politics with the Big Dogs. Here's Anthony Holm.
What are the worst, some of the worst examples from your perspective?
Well, what a great question. You're right. You know, we find ourselves in a place today where governments have really taken advantage of the moment to impose their will or try to impose their will at the Capitol. And they often do so by saying that they have a right to have their voice heard. And what I oftentimes try to remind members of is the fact that governments don't have rights, governments have powers. Only citizens have rights, and those constitutionally protected rights are being infringed upon by the actions of government as they go and try to get their usually progressive ideas across the finish line. Now, you ask, what are the worst examples that I've seen? One of the ones that drove me crazy this session was government's defense of guaranteed income programs. This is literally where governments are handing out bags of money,
tax dollars,
for
our
existing
tax dollars.
Yeah, and Harris County is probably the best example that comes to mind. Harris County had two guaranteed income programs, both of which I believe were ruled or deemed unconstitutional by the courts, but they were attempting to selectively provide various communities, I believe it was $500 per month, funded by $20 million in federal pandemic aid. So, the money that was supposed to help with COVID, somehow that ended up, in Harris County's mind, being usable for guaranteed income programs. And of course, we go to the legislature to try and stamp out this idea both in cities as well as counties. And we were met with opposition from taxpayer-funded lobbying all along the way, to the point where the bills failed. The legislature did not ban UBIs this session. So it's staggering the amount of government activity and lobbying that happens up there. I think, again, most people would be mind blown and outraged by how our money has been weaponized against us.
Well spoken. Well spoken. Another one that I saw was protect cities' rights to ensure citizens cannot carry guns. I'm stunned by that. Stunned by that. The DEI programs, protect our rights for X. You nailed it on your lead. Cities don't have rights. Citizens have rights. They have powers, and the powers are given to them by the citizens. And as we push 250 years, we're forgetting that. We are a republic, and you and I and our listeners are defenders of this republic. We are a system that the people have the power, and we afford bits and pieces of it to the government. Guess what, folks? We can take it back. And passing a ban of a real ban without loopholes of banning taxpayer-funded lobbying is part of our opportunity, our responsibility, and our duty to our children to take rights back and powers away from government so that we can build a great state, that we can stay liberty-minded, and we can be a home of the free, because they're coming for us. There's no question about that. They're coming for us. James, can you indulge me for a few more minutes on at least a little bit of another topic? Do you have time for that?
Of course. Happy to be of service.
You are also a thought leader in lowering property taxes and a concept that I still struggle with called compression. Can you give our listeners at least an intro for that? And we may have to have you come back at some point and have a more substantive discussion. But I will frame it in this way, that every session, the legislature comes out and says, oh, we lowered your property tax, we lowered your property taxes, we did this, we did that. Some of them were saying in May, we dropped them by $50 billion. Yet, my property taxes go up. Everybody else's property tax, I know, continue going up. And the ledge seems to point at appraisal boards, and appraisal boards seem to point at the ledge. What's going on here? You're a guy who does this and does this all the time. Speak to us. Educate us.
Terrific question, yes. Just to set the stage just a little bit, so we came out of the regular session with a $10 billion tax cut. Some of that is going to manifest in the form of a homestead exemption increase, and we'll all get a chance to vote on that in November. A small portion of that will take the form of rate compression. And rate compression is just a fancy way of saying the state is telling school districts to lower their tax rates. And to keep these folks whole, the state is going to come in over the top and use surplus money to help keep the lights on in our school districts. So the school districts will see no change in their spending or revenue, but everyone's taxes are supposed to go down just a little bit. Now, one of the great frustrations with all of this is the legislature has been relatively good on providing tax relief, but they have a mixed record on tax reform. And there's a very big difference between the two, because tax relief means your bill's going down. Tax reform means your bill stays down. And they have not done a good job on that, right? And so when we look ahead to the special session, we have an opportunity for more tax relief, because the one big beautiful bill includes a big slug of money for states that have spent in the past on border security. And so I think we're going to get a refund of some of our money, which will enable state level policymakers to put that towards more tax relief. But as we've tried to remind our friends, it's not enough to simply cut taxes. We have to put in place the guardrails to make sure they stay down. And so we're working right now on a host of different policy reforms that will help keep taxes down. And if anyone's interested, you can find all of that information on texaspolicy.com. But probably the chief one, the best one, if I could only have one,
please tell us.
It would be to enact a local government spending limit, because we can do all sorts of things to make our property tax revenue limit better. But unless we get spending under control, governments will find ways to raise money through fees, fines, and other revenue sources to keep their level of spending up and growing. So we've got to get a handle on spending in order to ultimately satisfy that tax question.
Now, I know we really don't have time for this, but I've got to ask you a couple more questions on it. So some people are going to say, and I think fairly, hey, what about local control there? Why is the state going to put a lid on it? What's your response to that?
Yeah, Texas prides itself on being a limited government state. And as part of that, what the state has done is it has put into effect 5 different statutory and constitutional spending limits that govern how quickly state finances can grow. And I think what's good for the goose is also good for the gander. We ought to apply those same concepts down to the local level so as to preserve that limited government function. But more to the point, when we start talking about local control, I think a lot of people confuse that local control term so as to empower local government in some special way. But really, local control ought to refer to the individual, because it's self-government that is most important. And we have to do more things to empower the individual to be able to grow and prosper so that our society can grow and prosper. And so by containing the burden of government at the local level, what we're doing is we're putting more dollars in the pockets of the individual and allowing the private sector and the free market to grow and succeed so that we can all grow and succeed.
Thank you. Any closing thoughts? Is there anything that I failed to ask about either taxpayer-funded lobbying or just the short snippet about how to compress property taxes and keep them down? I think it was a clever distinction.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I'd remind folks is we have a local government debt problem in this state. And when you look at all debt owed by all local governments, both principal and interest, what you find is that we have a $500 billion tab. $500 billion is owed by every tech or by all Texans. And so we have, of course, another bond election season bearing down upon us in November. Every voter ought to walk into that voting booth knowing that we not only have a huge burden to contend with, which of course is borne by our property taxes, but every new debt measure will have a fiscal impact on that homeowner moving forward, meaning that new debt invites new taxes. I think that's something that most voters don't recognize, or at least too few do. And so as we head into election season in November, I want all your listeners to know that new debt equals new taxes, and you ought to take that into consideration as you weigh your vote.
Sounds like we should pass a state law that says all bonds shall be called new taxes.
I like it.
I think they'd crash 85-15 on those elections. Okay, James. Hey, I want to thank you for fighting for liberty, fighting for the movement. You've given 17 years of your life serving the cause, and we appreciate you. We honor you. We'll have you back.
Well, thank you, my friend.
I hope you'll come back.
I will, anytime.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Well, we heard it, folks. We heard it right here. We've learned about an abusive taxpayer-funded lobbying practice that's been going on for years that's only getting worse. Approximately $100 million sent in our tax dollars from our pockets, put into the pockets of lobbyists in Austin. To do what? To fight against the values, the beliefs, the regulations, and the laws that we hold dear, the bills that we hold dear and want to memorialize into law. This must end, and we know how to end it. We're going to communicate with our legislators. We're going to communicate with the governor of Texas and say if they won't end this in the first 30 days, give them another 30 days and a third special session if needed. We also have to communicate to our legislators. Passing a bill with a loophole so big you can drive a truck through it is not ending taxpayer-funded lobbying. We learned the difference between tax relief and tax reform. Fascinating to me. I had been critical of the legislature for not advancing enough tax relief. Turns out a big piece of the problem, perhaps a majority of the problem, is in tax reform, ensuring that local governments do not increase our appraisals, do not increase the percentage of taxation that they take just to negate the property tax relief given by the Texas legislature. Our opportunity exists now to speak together. Oh, we also learned, this was fascinating to me, that the big, beautiful bill, Donald Trump and the feds are sending money to Texas to pay us back for defending the border against the invasion that has occurred over the last 15 years, particularly last 12 years, and increasing the last 5 years, defending America. We spent tremendous amounts of state tax dollars defending the border, and we're getting money back. Those funds are positioned potentially and presumably to go into property tax relief. What a gift. Thank you. But remember, relief isn't enough. We must get reform. We learned the difference in the distinction, at least of what I think is a interesting distinction of local control. Is it the control and the rights of the individual, or is it local government? We discussed how governments don't have rights, individuals have rights. Local governments also have powers, and we give them those powers. Fascinating, interesting way to think about it. We discussed the outstanding local debt that is going to cripple us all if we don't pay attention to it in Texas. This was shocking to me. $500 billion in outstanding local government debt. That's a big number. It's hard to get our head around, but we have approximately 33 million Texans in this state. So what does that mean? It means the debt already outstanding and owed by local governments equal right around $15,000 per every individual in Texas. So I'm stuck with $15,000 in debt, just cascading over us. You're stuck with it. Our children, our grandchildren, that's where we are. That's the debt burden of local governments in the state of Texas. I had no idea. None. We understand now what taxpayer-funded lobbying is, how abusive it is, and the opportunity cost that it takes from us. With these lobbyists blocking our bills, it means other good policies weren't implemented. And folks like James and you and I and all of us who are fighting for change are not allocating our time and energy to lowering property taxes or to advancing property tax reform or accountability in our schools. So I had only considered thus far the bags of cash going from local governments into the pockets of lobbyists to oppose the ideas, the views, the values, and the beliefs that we have and try to embody into regulation, into laws. I had not considered the opportunity costs of that trade of that time, or those funds going back to an individual who starts a business and creates jobs and has the wonderful effect, the ripple effect throughout the economy. Really good information, really wise way to think about this. So what are we going to do? We are empowered. We're going to call our legislators. We're going to talk to our friends and our family and our legislators and say, number one, got to pass taxpayer-funded lobbying. You got to pass it now, and you can't pass it with loopholes that allow people to drive a truck through. It works or it doesn't, but have the Constitution to stay. We're going to communicate with the Governor Abbott. Thank you for putting it on the call. And if the legislature can't get it together and do it in the next 30 days, put it on a second call and a third call. We as a people are committed to defending the Constitution and to limiting and eliminating taxpayer-funded lobbying. Think about the signers, folks. Think about those who signed the Declaration of Independence, where at almost 250 years, they sent it to the most powerful human in the world at the time, the King of England. They risked their life, literally presumed they were going to be killed for this. They fought for our rights, the soldiers who fought ahead of us, the freedom fighters for liberty who fought ahead of us. It is time for us to do our part. We can start today. Taxpayer-funded lobbying must end. It's a corruptive, dirty little secret in Austin, and we can do it. We will do it together because we are change agents. We have the power and the voice to affect change. You can do this. I can do this. We're going to do it. We're going to do it together. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you in advance for the actions you're taking. God bless Texas. And thank you for joining us on Politics with the Big Dogs.